Hi, my name is Mark Hunter, and I've been watching the atheist channels on YouTube. Things like The Cosmic Skeptic with Alex J. O'Connor and The Atheist Experience with Matt Dillahunty. And these chaps will quite rightly complain that Christians often use what are called straw man arguments to discredit what the atheists are saying. In other words, they will suggest that atheists believe a particular thing for such and such reasons, and then they will actually show that the reasons for believing that point of view are invalid, and thus they will seek to demolish those arguments or knock down the straw man. Now, the problem is that they quite often misrepresent what the atheists are actually saying, or else they improperly state the reasons for believing that point of view, and so they make themselves look foolish, in fact, and show that Christians can be illogical and irrational. An example of this might be something like when the young earth creationists would believe that the earth was created in 6 literal 24-hour days periods of just a few thousand years ago. So they would then present the scientist view as believing in an old earth, being based on radiometric dating and the fossil record. So then the argument goes that radiometric dating is used to date the fossil record, but then when the fossil record disagrees with the radiometric dating, and the fossil record is used to calibrate the radiometric dating. And so they would suggest that neither method is reliable. Now, scientists would obviously refute this with saying that the radiometric dating methods actually calibrate against each other because there are different isotopes that decay at different lengths of time. And if they're found in the same strata of rock, then you can use one substance to actually calibrate against the other, which is fair enough. And also, you've got other methods for dating an ancient universe and an ancient Earth, such as, for instance, the light time it takes to reach us from distant stars, being billions of years. And when you're looking at geological rock strata, they will sometimes fold in on themselves, but it takes eons of time to do that in a slow process without fracturing. So, of course, we can see that the young Earth creationists have actually set up a false scenario, a straw man, which they can pick faults with, but it doesn't actually deal with the evidence for the age of the Earth at all. And I've got great sympathy with the atheists when they point this out, because it must be frustrating for them when they're misrepresented. But in the same way, unfortunately, I believe the argument can be levelled against the atheists because they tend to do the opposite, in the sense that they will make a straw God argument, which bears no resemblance to the Christian sort of concept of God at all. And then they will pick faults with that and ridicule that, when actually, if you ask the theologian, it would be a totally alien concept to them, and they're actually not representing the correct theological view about God. So, for instance, they may say things like, how could a cruel God send people to an eternity of hell? Now, any theologian would immediately recognise this is a straw God argument, because if you actually look what the judgment of God is actually about, if we look at the book of Revelation, chapter 22, verse 11, it says this: God says, let him who does wrong continue to do wrong. Let him who is vile continue to be vile. Let him who does right continue to do right. And let him who is holy continue to be holy. So we see that the judgment of God is simply leaving people in the state which they choose to be in, and I guess the destination of those people is a place where people in that state actually belong. So if you think about it, a Christian is someone who realises that he's in a sinful, selfish state, not fit for heaven. And so he repents of his sinful state and asks God to make him like Jesus Christ. And then the Bible says that one day those with faith in Christ will meet him in person. When they see him, they'll be transformed to be like him and fit for heaven. Now, the atheist, on the other hand, has made no agreement with God to be changed like Christ at all. Now, they may well want to be better human beings, or they may not. But it's all on their terms and by their own efforts. So they may be good at maintaining friendships and relationships in our short time on earth, where society cooperates within certain boundaries, so we're not all fighting each other to survive. But if there is an afterlife, what are the rules of survival there? The scientists can't tell us, can they? Because they've got nothing to base their experiments on. Well, Jesus warned us that man cannot live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So if we're in a state of being in relationship with God, where we keep feeding on his words, and that will sustain us in the afterlife. And in fact, the heavenly community is held together in perfect harmony for eternity by the continual revelation of God's infinite being and his love. Whereas if we're in a state of being separated from God, then we still have this everlasting consciousness, but we don't have anything to satisfy us for eternity. So we slide into this isolated state of self-pity, which the Bible describes as the outer darkness, where there's wailing and gnashing of teeth. And this concept of a self-made hell has been out there a long time. If we read the Dickens novel about Scrooge, we see where his ex-partner Jacob Marley, the ghost comes to him and says that the chains that he forged in life have tormented him in death. And so there are different ways of looking at the same thing. One might see a man drowning in a sea of self-destruction, heading for hell, and saying, well, how can God allow that? But if God has thrown him a lifebelt, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ, and he can have faith in Christ and be saved, that's a different perspective to saying that God's just allowing him to drown. So an atheist may say there's no evidence for the afterlife, and there's no evidence for the supernatural, so what does it matter anyway? But the purpose of this video was simply to show how one side's argument can be misrepresented by another side. The video about the supernatural will come later. Now, I intend to finish off every video I do with a little gospel song, so here's the first one. Jesus is the Saviour whom I love to know. Heaven is the haven where I'm going to. Jesus is the captain who now rules my life. Unworthy as I am, I know he came to save a sinner such as me. A sinner such as me, he came to save from the grave. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes on him shall never perish but have everlasting life. Well, sometimes when I'm lonely and I'm feeling blue, Jesus does the things that only God can do. Sometimes when I'm lonely and I'm feeling blue, Jesus picks me up and then pulls me through. A sinner such as me, a sinner such as me, he came to save from the grave. Well, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, believes in him should never perish but have everlasting life. Well, if you come to Jesus, he will set you free from your fears and phobias and your misery. If you care to trust him, he will give you peace. His Holy Spirit power in your life release. A sinner such as me, a sinner such as me, he came to save from the grave. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should never perish but have everlasting life.